So happy to be here and see all of you. Noah mentioned we're having a retreat this week, and about half of the people in the retreat already know each other, but have never met except outside of Zoom. So we're pretty excited to be here and to be together. I really want to thank Roshi Joan, first of all, for just making this place, this incredible, I told you it was beautiful, right? This incredibly beautiful place, all that it offers, all that it holds. And it has meant so much to me and so many of us here. And to be able to keep it going for so many years is really a huge commitment and a gift to us all. And I really want to thank Noah, Kodo, and the team here. You've been so generous and helping me in the past few weeks getting organized for the retreat. So I really appreciate it. The retreat is called Lifting the Gaze, as Noah said. And as I mentioned, a lot of the people here are from this online group. And the group itself, the song is also called Lifting the Gaze. So we'll talk a little bit more about lifting the gaze. About 35 years ago, I began studying and practicing Buddhism in the Tibetan tradition with my guru, the late, great Gelug Rinpoche. And in this tradition, we learned how to meditate in 2 stages. So first, we started by placing the gaze forward and down toward the floor. For those of you that are not familiar with the Buddhist way of meditating, we meditate with our eyes open. All my yoga friends are like completely weirded out by that, but that's how we do it. So we start with the gaze down and forward toward the floor, and this is called close attention. And the idea is that we have a tight container to help us develop our practice when we're starting, to help us watch our mind, get familiar with how it behaves, and kind of closing in a space for that. And this method is called shamatha, or calm abiding. And then at a certain point, your teacher will decide that you're ready to lift your gaze to eye level. And lifting your gaze to eye level still has the same instructions. You're still going to stay steady and try not to let your eyes flit about, even though you're going to see light and shadow and movement and have an awareness of your environment. And in this tradition, the purpose of lifting the gaze is to begin to learn how to be in the environment with a meditative, aspect. So sounds and smells and all the kinds of things that happen in the world, we're not shutting those out. We don't have to hide in a cave in the dark with our eyes closed to be stable. The benefits of this method are said to be stability, clarity, and strength. But another really big benefit is that you do learn how to maintain your meditative awareness in the world and in community. And this is really what the practice is all about. This is where the practice is leading. Even though we have this little square, this amazing little square we can sit on. It's very simple and yet contains so much. So it's really leading towards being together. And there's a Buddhist scripture that says, friendship is not the half of the holy life, it's the whole of the holy life. Excuse me. So here we are now in community, lifting our gazes together. Someone else once said, meditating alone is how practice starts. Meditating with others is how practice grows. So in a way, you could think of starting the practice by lifting the gaze towards yourself. And it's not so easy to do that. Generally when we take a look at ourselves, we get judgy, we get self-critical, but it is possible to look at ourselves with openness and curiosity, with kindness and compassion. These days, this is not a shocking idea, right? Even if you aren't familiar with the Buddhist path. It's pretty trendy. It's all over Instagram. It's all over TikTok. I think I don't do TikTok, but I'm pretty sure it's all over TikTok and social media, right? The first mainstream iteration of self-care, this is what we're talking about, right? Self-care, that I remember really well was the wellness trend of detoxing. Back in the day, I used to get tons of emails letting me know all the ways that I was toxic. Food, air, relationships, inner dialogue, aggressive exercising, spin class, bad sleep habits. These wellness newsletters were really into telling you what was wrong with you so that you would buy their wide variety of cleanses that were available with one click. And the topic of purification and detoxing and cleansing was really so hot at a particular time that I, for a long time, was teaching at yoga journal conferences. I have to do this because I can only see my words with my glasses. And so anyway, I was teaching at yoga journal conferences, and the director of the conference said, if you want your class to be the most successful class, all you have to do is put the word detox in the title. So, of course, I did that. I know it was pretty effective, but I've thought about this a lot, so from one perspective, this consumeristic approach to taking care of yourself makes sense, right? Needs have been identified, solutions proposed. We feel incomplete. We feel unloved, inadequate, and out of shape. Being toxic might be our own making, but fortunately, we can easily purify ourselves by purchasing a juice cleanse. In fact, we could even purify ourselves every day because there's a different one for Sunday, Monday, different seasons, different times of the day. And that's great because it means you can continue your toxic ways. Because no matter what happens, you can keep detoxing. So I think that this trend kind of faded out a little bit. And a new one has come, which is self-care. When that happened, I started getting newsletters telling me how to get more sleep, that I should do more restorative yoga, that I should take time out to get together with a friend, do barefoot walking on the grass, and keep a gratitude journal. Actually, I think those are all really good ideas. But on their own, none of them are going to satisfy our dissatisfaction. None of them are going to reduce our craving. None of them are going to relieve our suffering. At various points in our life, I think we all do feel a need for some kind of relief from our life, from our daily life. We look for some sanctuary. We look for some refuge. And we look for it in a lot of ways. Maybe they're not wrong. I think we look for it with food, chocolate, drinking, over-exercising, social media. Some people get obsessed with their financial investments. That didn't ever happen to me. But the opposite, online shopping. None of this is evil, by the way, but it's what you might call secular seeking as opposed to spiritual seeking. Hoping for relief from the challenges of our life, and maybe it's just a way to avoid dealing with your relationship with yourself. Now, because of that, because it's about avoiding or escaping, these kind of refuges don't really work. They just lead to more craving. I was thinking about this because yesterday was Halloween. You get a piece of candy, chocolate. Everybody likes chocolate, I think. You get a piece of chocolate and you eat it, and that feels good, and you get a little chocolate rush. And then you have a crash, and so you need more chocolate. And then eventually more chocolate doesn't work anymore, so now you need popcorn and salt and peanuts, and you get it, right? We just keep looking for more soothing, more comfort, more cocoon-like hiding places. But an authentic spiritual refuge is completely different. A spiritual refuge offers a path that moves you gently towards really, truly feeling your own basic goodness that was already there. and helps you live into the manifestation of that goodness, into the aliveness of that goodness, by offering you practices of awakening, like mindfulness meditation, maitri, loving kindness, loving friendliness, and even self-compassion. And the Buddhist tradition offers us a structure, a process for stepping onto this path. We first awaken to our own suffering, which eventually awakens us to the recognition of other people's suffering. Now, you might be listening to this and thinking, okay, yeah, but my life is actually super stressful, and I deserve a treat now and then. And I think you're absolutely right. But applying a materialistic approach to our pain and our boredom and our loneliness and our aching back is at best going to be a band-aid. You know, meditation as an aspirin, yoga as an aspirin, breath work as an aspirin. The momentary deliciousness of a pedicure, for example, is like a painkiller that works so well, it actually discourages us from exploring or trying to even remove the thorn in our foot that made us get the pedicure in the first place, that's causing our suffering in the first place. And besides, isn't it our suffering that makes us feel deserving of all these self-care goodies? Well, actually, what our suffering really deserves is compassion. And when I started to get this, when I started to grok this from working with Gallic Rinpoche, I was really inspired to take the bodhisattva vow. The bodhisattva vow is a vow where you commit your life to helping others become awakened. When Rinpoche, Gallic Rinpoche, introduced this concept to me, I was inspired. I was really inspired by this idea that my efforts and practice weren't just for me, but could be for other people, that my caring and compassion could be expanded to be dedicated to everyone. It was a beautiful idea. I really liked that idea. But that's really not what Rinpoche said. That's just what I heard for about 20 years. And I finally woke up to what he actually said, which was that a bodhisattva is a person who dedicates their life for the benefit of all beings, and all beings includes you, includes me. I didn't get that. I didn't get that because it's so far against the stream of what I grew up thinking and what my mother taught me. Perfectly nice mother, but you know, she taught me good and nice people don't put themselves first. That's being selfish. So when I heard about this idea of caring for yourself, this idea of self-care, I kind of thought, ew, like it seems sort of icky, like taking yourself out for a date or something. It seemed really sad and lonely. And then I realized that I am sad and lonely sometimes. And it's nothing that a bubble bath can fix, because applying a band-aid is not the same as having a caring heart. And one of the books that I read for chaplaincy, Reb Anderson's book, Being Upright, he wrote, all suffering is worthy. Self-care might be a one-off event. Self-caring is an attitude or an approach that informs your daily life. So we can think of self-care as the seed for self-caring. Then if we look at the word compassion, it's made up of two words, cum, which means with, and passion, which means passion. So compassion is not just caring, it's really, really caring. It's with passion, it's passionate. It's deep, warm energy that we all know, that we're all familiar with, because it's a natural part of who we are. We don't have to drum it up. It's who we are. And just like we don't need to buy detox products because our body already knows how to detox. We sweat, we poop, we breathe, we pee, we have a liver. We're detoxing every day. We don't have to buy anything to grow our compassion either. We don't have to buy anything to allow our innate capacity for passionate caring to emerge and to ripen and to increase. We just have to make it a habit, a practice. As a yoga and meditation teacher, when I talk about practice, I'm usually referring to yoga asana or meditation or pranayama, which is also called breath work. When we engage in these practices, we don't say, I'm doing self-yoga, or I'm doing self-meditation, or I'm going to do some self-pranayama. So when we think of self-compassion, we could just think of it as compassion. And I think that's really an interesting step, because then we're moving toward a larger view of practice, one that is for the benefit of all beings, including ourselves. So how can we shift from the Band-Aid approach to a practice of self-compassion? I think even that question is a good start. The Tibetan word for practice is gom, G-O-M, which means a process of getting familiar, or processes of getting familiar. I think that most of us are pretty familiar with our habits of self-criticism and self-judgment and self-blame. So the first step is to notice when these kinds of thoughts arise. And I do. No need to push them away. No need to give them airtime in your head by layering more criticism on top of them. You can just notice. Sometimes I think of those thoughts as like this little being sitting on my shoulder, and I'm like, okay, we're not doing that right now. And then they leave. All our practices actually are methods for slowing down or even stopping the momentum of these kinds of dispositive habits. So this gives us space to create new habits. And as many of you know, this process is called neuroplasticity. I think of neuroplasticity like this. If you imagine a park in a big urban city like New York City, the parks usually have a sign that says, don't walk on the grass. And of course, all true hardcore New Yorkers ignore that sign and walk across the grass. They know, they're from New York. So you can imagine, they have like a little corner and there's a diagonal path that gets developed over time because, we're in a hurry, the New Yorkers. And so then what happens? The park department puts up a fence and we go around and the grass grows back over. And that's what happens to your brain too, with dedicated practice. So the practice of self-compassion is about getting familiar with that part of you that's naturally compassionate and getting familiar with what it feels like to apply that tenderness to yourself. And also letting go of the old habits of not being very nice to yourself now and then, letting that worn old pathway grow over. Sometimes I think about when I was a dancer. I was a dancer in New York, professional dancer for about 20 years. And I suffered so much. I was in my 20s. And, when I see a picture of myself, then I'm like, I wish I looked like that now, But back then, I saw myself in the mirror every day. And what I saw was never, ever good enough. I wasn't thin enough. I wasn't special enough. I wasn't amazing enough. I was also really crabby, really grumpy most of the time. And all those recreational drugs that I enjoyed so much didn't make me like myself better either. Now I'm 70. And my heart breaks when I think of that young woman, and I vow to be kinder to myself now. I don't want to be that way to myself anymore because I don't deserve it. I also know that when I'm uncompassionate to myself, I'm more difficult to be around. This is called motivation. It's how we start all spiritual practices. It's actually useful to purposefully state your motivation for practicing self-compassion. Doesn't have to be a big deal. It can be really simple. For example, you can say, I am practicing to get familiar with when I am uncompassionate toward myself and vow not to go there. I vow to grow my capacity for being a compassionate person. This can become almost like a mantra that you can call on anytime so that eventually it just becomes part of you. That's practice. So we're going to try it right now. We're going to do a little practice together. First, we'll say this, and if you like, you can put your hands over your heart and feel your heartbeat as you say it. Even if you feel silly or you think this is magical thinking, you can still say it anyway, because what you're doing is getting familiar with what it's like to open to your own potential. And after we do this, then we're going to move into a short practice called grounding touch, which is just a way to connect with yourself, check in with how you're feeling, sort of give yourself some comfort with your hands and just be curious. So we'll start with a little breathing. You can close your eyes. Gather your mind onto the feeling of your breath, just as it is right now. Just because you're starting to pay attention to it, it might change, but don't change it on purpose. Just see if you can notice your ordinary, amazing, beautiful breath as it is right now. And then we're going to organize this breath into a samavriti. Samavriti means equal fluctuation, which is a way to balance your energy. So we'll breathe in and out for 5 counts, and I'll talk you through it. Take a breath in and a breath out. And now breathe in for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4. One more time. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Breathe naturally. And then if you like, you can repeat after me. I am practicing to get familiar with when I am uncompassionate toward myself. And I vow not to go there. I vow to grow my capacity for being a compassionate person. Now place one hand on your belly and one hand on the center of your chest. You can have your eyes open or closed, whatever you like. Just tune in to the feeling of your hands on your body, the warmth and the weight. And tune into the feeling of your breath moving your hands. Breathe in. Now, as you exhale, take from the hand from your belly and place it on your forehead. Breathe in. As you exhale, take the hand from your chest around to your lower back. Breathe in. As you exhale, take the hand from your forehead down to your lower belly. Breathe in. As you exhale, take the hand from your back onto your chest. Breathe in. As you exhale, take the hand from your belly and put it on top of your other hand at your chest. Then just separate your hands and bring them together almost into prayer hands, like 1 inch between your hands. Feel the warmth there. Breathe in. As you exhale, bring your palms together. Feel the very moment they touch. Inhale, separate your hands 1 inch. Exhale, palms together. Inhale, separate your hands. Exhale, palms together. Inhale, separate your hands. Exhale, palms together. Begin to rub your hands. Make a little warmth. A little bit more warmth. Kind of cold in here. And then cup your hands over your face. Have a sense of your skin kind of drinking in that warmth. And then let your hands slide down your body and place your palms on your thighs. Press down just a little bit, like the weight of a nickel, just a little bit. This is called, in yoga, this is called grounding the apana. The apana is the downward moving wind or energy that helps you stay grounded. And as you press down, sit up a little taller. Slowly turn your head to the right. See everything along the way. Scan the horizon of your environment. And then see everything all the way back. All the people that came to practice with you. This beautiful place. Over to the other side. And everything along the way back to the center. Okay, so this is a little grounding practice that you can do to just gather yourself together at any time. This kind of practice comes under the category of tend and befriend. Tend and befriend is known as a stress response. In the bigger category of what you might be more familiar with, fight, flight, and freeze. Tending refers to when you engage in activities, even like that nurture you, that feel protective, that help you feel safe and calm. And befriending means, hanging out with your friends, which naturally leads to feelings of being tended. Tending and befriending is, according to the scientists, more typical of female behavior, female responses to stress, as opposed to fight or flight responses. When confronted with a threat, women tend to gather together, make sure everybody's okay, check in on everybody. Tend and befriend also is really good for you. It increases your oxytocin, which is a hormone, anti-stress hormone. It lowers your cortisol, it lowers your blood pressure, it lowers your heart rate. It reduces the activity on the HIPAA axis, which moderates your stress. So because of all the good things it does for you, it has a nickname, which is the feel-good hormone. And it actually makes you feel good. It's not just good for you. And it's interesting to note that tend and befriend activities are thought of, or tend and befriend is thought of as a stress response, but it can also be a behavioral response. In other words, when a stressful situation arises, the sympathetic nervous system, which is connected to the spine, kicks in and it tells you to move now. And so you go into fight or flight or freeze. And this sends all of the blood to your muscles, to your heart. And it slows down everything else that's going on, reproductive, digestive, everything you don't need to run away or fight. The other, so we have a choice. We can do that. We can go into fight or flight anytime. It doesn't have to be a reaction. It can be a behavioral response. Or if we've practiced tending and befriending, we can call on it. It's a resource. You can call on it because you're familiar with it. You can call on it in a conscious way when you feel threatened or vulnerable or burned out or sad or lonely or unloved or fill in the blank. Instead of just applying it like a Band-Aid, we can make it a habit of doing tending and befriending exercises. What that does is the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system. It kicks in the parasympathetic nervous system, which is closer to the organs rather than the spine. And it tells the organs what to do and when to do it. And one thing it tells them to do is to relax. So this also comes under the category of rest and digest. We actually need both of these. We need the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. We need to tone them both so that depending on what the situation is, our nervous system can be nimble and we can become resilient. And I think that just the way that tend and befriend sort of leads to rest and digest, we could say that the practice of ahimsa leads to loving kindness, which in turn leads to compassion. Ahimsa means non-harming of self and others. So it's basically renunciation, except that the very act of a renunciation is active. But otherwise, it's a non-doing. But it's not really a non-doing because it's creating a foundation for gentleness and safety. Integrating an attitude of ahimsa into your life and your practice is a good starting point. And from there, we can grow into loving kindness or maitri practice, sometimes called metta. It's usually translated as loving kindness, but it's also called loving friendliness. And it reminds me of the Dalai Lama, who is quoted as saying, "Everyone I meet is my friend." Can you imagine if you felt that way? If you even felt that way for 5 minutes? Can you imagine if you felt that way towards yourself? Can you be your own friend? Can you love yourself unconditionally? Even with all those things you want to change about yourself, your hopes and your fears and your short hair and your long legs, your long hair and your short legs, and everything you want to change about yourself, could you love yourself no matter what? So one way to work through this is with the classic Buddhist meditation where you imagine that every person you see was your mother in a previous life. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this. Rinpoche told me when he first came to America that he was really surprised that a lot of people didn't want to do that meditation because they didn't like their mother. He was from Tibet and he never heard of that before. But we're not Tibetans. We're not, I mean, maybe someone is, but anyway, there's another way to do it, which is to flip it. And you can imagine that you were everyone's mother. Or you can imagine that you were your own mother. It's a feeling that we already know because you've cared for your children or your parents or your dog or your neighbors. So close your eyes for a second and choose one of those. You are everyone's mother. Maybe there's one person here who you could think was maybe your mother. Or you could be your own mother. Get familiar with that feeling. Get familiar with that place inside you so that you can call on that whenever you need it. Breathe in. And as you exhale, open your eyes. So this is one step toward cultivating self-compassion, loving friendliness towards yourself. And this leads to compassion for everyone. I remember a Zen saying that I think is pretty famous, but I learned it from Roshi Joan. Taking care of yourself is taking care of the world. When we practice self-compassion, we're stepping actually into the platform of spiritual maturity. Shantideva talked about this at the very beginning of the Bodhisattva's way of life. He said, don't expect the whole world to be covered with leather. Put leather on your own feet, and then you can carry on helping people. This is spiritual maturity. When we practice self-compassion, we don't have to rely on things outside ourselves. We don't have to call on other people to take care of us. We can be there for ourselves, and we can be there for each other. And that's lifting the gaze. Thank you. I think I'm supposed to say we have time for questions. We have like 2 minutes, right?
Yeah, we have 2 minutes.
Okay.
If you'd like to.
Anybody have a question
Question
or comment? I bribed a few people to ask me a question, but they're not doing it.
You want to just say where people could find out more about your work?
Oh, sure. If you want to find out more about my work, you can go to my website, cyndilee.com. And my Substack, which is free and comes out freely 3 times a month, 1 time paid. And it's all about meditation and your life, one's life. I think that's all I got.
Thank you. So shall we end with the 4 bodhisattva vows?